Kamen Rider Build is a show that feels like a grand culmination of everything great about the franchise, and that's because it was designed to be that way from its conception according to one of the producers, Takahito Omori. From the show era's core themes of being a hero of justice in spite of the setbacks, the dramatic weight and impact of early Heisei, and the wacky comedy plus pleasing aesthetics of later Heisei, the show mixes and matches elements from each era of Kamen Rider to make something truly special. Shogo Muto wrote every episode and movie for Build, and this is his first and currently only tokusatsu credit, though he's written for other Japanese dramas before, such as Denshin Okuto or Train Boy. Major spoiler warning, as this show is nearly impossible to talk about spoiler-free with the amount of twists and turns it contains. I highly encourage you to watch Kamen Rider Build before watching this analysis, because I'm going to be spoiling nearly every major plot beat this show has to offer, and I really want you guys to watch it blind so the twists and turns hit harder. All good? Alright. This is Kamen Rider Build.
Build! Rabbit! Best match! レバーを回して変身サートラビットデラックスビルドドライバーゴリラモンドセットも
10 years ago, on an expedition to Mars, an astronaut found Pandora's box and took it back to Earth. However, the same astronaut touched the box, which created the Skywall, dividing Japan into 3 nations: Toto, Seito, and Hokuto. In the present day, monsters known as Smash are raging around in Toto. However, a mysterious Kamen Rider has been combating them in secret. The writer's civilian identity is that of Sento Kiryu, an egotistical genius physicist who studies Pandora's box at the request of Toto's government. Sento gains new powers for Build by defeating and absorbing Smash's essence, and giving them to a young girl known as Misora, who has the mysterious gift for purification. The two live in a cafe with its eccentric owner and Misora's father, Soichi. However, Sento has amnesia, as he doesn't remember anything before Soichi found him and took him in a year before the series began. The story properly begins when Sento meets Banjo Ryuga, a former boxer and wanted convict for the murder of renowned scientist Takumi Katsuragi. In the middle of the confrontation, a Smash appears, which gives us the full debut fight of Kamen Rider Build. After the fight, Banjo tells Sento that he was experimented on by the creators of the Smash and pleads innocent. Sento believes Banjo since his memories of being experimented on are very similar to the few memories Sento has before he met Soichi and became a Kamen Rider. This makes the Kamen Rider public enemy number 1 of the Toto government, and thus one of the greatest relationships in the Kamen Rider franchise sparked. This is how Build begins, and oh boy, what a beginning it is. In one episode alone, we've established Mars, Pandora's box, political tension between the divided nations of Japan, an amnesiac protagonist, and a convicted secondary protagonist. Despite all this dramatic weight in the plot, the show still makes time for funny jokes and character interactions to make the audience care about the characters when the drama starts hitting hard. As mentioned before, the Showa era of Kamen Rider was all about fighting evil and protecting human lives in spite of everything holding our heroes back, and Build embodies those themes very well, especially of the arc of the aggressive musclehead Banjo Ryuga and the introduction of his Kamen Rider form, Cross, spelled Cross-Z. However, unlike modern secondary writers who transform within the first 2 episodes, Banjo doesn't transform till episode 11. This gives the show time for Banjo to grow as a character and learn what being a Kamen Rider means, which will make it more rewarding when he finally does transform. The way this all plays out is that in episode 2, Banjo finds out that his girlfriend has been turned into a Smash with no way to save her outside of killing her. With Banjo's begrudging consent, Sento defeats the Smash and has one last moment with his girlfriend before she gets turned into the Dragon Full Bottle, which Banjo uses in the following episodes to fight foot soldiers on Transform. In the next episode, Banjo asks Sento why he fights against the Smash. Sento responds with, "If you're expecting a reward, then it isn't justice," a defining line for Sento's character and Banjo's development. Later on, when Sento loses most of his bottles, Banjo has to find his resolve to transform on his own, which he finds by reading his girlfriend's last words, which gives him the passion to protect others, finally letting him transform into Kamen Rider Cross. Hissing! However, Banjo immediately figured out that those last words were written by Sento, not his girlfriend, but he thanks him anyway for giving him the push to become a Kamen Rider. Yeah, the end of this character arc has a comedic twist to it, but it still works well, mainly thanks to the excellent direction and acting from the cast and crew. Even if the scripts were exactly the same, I don't think Build would be half as impactful or well done if it weren't for the cast and crew assembled to bring these stories to life.
クローズドラゴンにドラ ラゴンフルバトルをセット。ビルドドライバーで変身。仮面ライダークローズデラックスクローズドラゴンビートクローザーも。
But enough about those pesky emotions, let me gush about how aesthetically pleasing Build is. Kamen Rider Build transforms by inserting two full bottles into the driver. One bottle is based on a living thing, and the other is based on a non-living thing. While Build can mix and match these bottles, he's more inclined to use a best match form, which includes stuff like Build's base form, Rabbit Tank, and secondary forms like Hot Gatling and Ninja Kamen. And that's not even a quarter of the forms Build can access from just the full bottles. He might be one of the most versatile riders when it comes to power sets and forms. My personal favorite forms are Rabbit Tank, Ninja Comic, Panda Rocket, and Pirate Train. A detail I appreciate is that before Cross's debut, Sento used the Dragon full bottle for himself for the Dragon Lock form, and the Dragon parts of that form's design are from the Cross suit. Cross also has a great design, but I don't got much else to say other than that. On that note, let's get back to the feels train. Throughout the first 13 episodes, Sento and Banjo look for clues relating to both of their pasts, which leads them to encountering Faust numerous times. Faust is currently led by Night Rogue and Bloodstock, pseudo-riders who've been causing a lot of mischief with the goal to get Pandora's box. Night Rogue is Gentoku, the son of Toto's prime minister. He sees his dad's peaceful ways of running Toto as weak, with a belief that the leader of a country must be strong to protect its citizens. As for Bloodstock... Soichi has been using Sento all along to purify the full bottles. This was because Misora wouldn't do it anymore after learning of Faust's intentions. Soichi taunts Sento with the notion that he's been playing Kamen Rider rather than being an actual hero of justice. Sento rejects these platitudes and uses a brand new power-up called Rabbit Tank Sparkling, aka Kamen Rider Pepsi Man, to chase Bloodstock away for a while. I'd also like to mention that in a later episode, Misora finds Soichi stealing the data for a new driver Sento was building called the Splash Driver. They have a touching moment of remembering the good times. After Soichi leaves, Misora begins to cry, as she realizes that her father has betrayed her. Build already had emotionally tear-jerking moments before, but this is when it started to hit into overdrive. Yeah, it was obvious that something was up with Soichi, but to me, the way the scene is written and directed matters more than a predictable twist. Also, Bloodstock is just brimming with charisma that makes any scene he's in golden. Unlike other shows of amnesiac protagonists, Build solves the mystery of the amnesia in the early episodes rather than waiting till the final arc, which is refreshing since most shows of that kind of protagonist will stretch the twist out for an unnecessarily long period of time. Not to mention, since this twist will affect and haunt Sento throughout the rest of the series, we get more time spent on that struggle rather than waiting till the final episodes. So it's revealed that Sento is the devil scientist, Takumi Katsuragi, the founder of Faust and creator of Kamen Rider Build. But wait, Sento and Katsuragi have different faces. How are they the same person? Well, Bloodstock knocked out Katsuragi after he proclaimed he wanted to leave Faust and changed his face to the face of Satotaro. Long story that I don't feel like getting into. So Stock killed Satotaro and gave him Katsuragi's face. Unfortunately, Banjo was going to the apartment thanks to some blackmail and he was caught with a dead body, which is how he got convicted of murder. On a side note, Aru of the Secret Skeletons book club brought up that this can relate back to Build's asymmetrical design, with Sento being a construct of two people like how each Build suit is a construct of two bottles. Build's base form, Rabbit Tank, can also be seen representing Sento and Katsuragi, with the rabbit being Sento since he has a lively personality with a goal of love and peace, and the tank being Katsuragi, inventing the Build driver as a weapon for war in the first place with a more cold personality. Sento and Banjo are distraught by this revelation, since it means Katsuragi and by proxy Sento are responsible for the villains and hardships they face, with Banjo taking his anger out on Sento for a while because of this. Later on, Hokuto starts to invade Toto, as Gentoku's dad / Toto's prime minister has been poisoned, leaving Gentoku in his place, and he has declared a war on Pandora's box to the other nations. During this first assault, Sento is still reeling over the revelation of his past, but Banjo knocks some sense into him by reminding him of all the good he has done as his own person. Satotaro and Katsuragi didn't save all those lives. It was Sento Kiryu.
最悪だ。お前に殺されちまうとはな。俺はナルシストで自意識過剰な正義のヒーローだってな。勝利の法則は決まった。
ってどうせ普通のグミでしょ。仮面ライダーグミ大発明。
The first arc of Kamen Rider Build was near perfection for me and many other viewers. The action, top notch, the character drama intense, the story consistently engaging, so the second arc had some big shoes to fill. So did it? Well, that's debatable, as I've seen people say that this sword build started to decline in quality, while others saying that this is where the show peaked. These are all different yet valid opinions to have, but since this is my analysis, you'll be hearing the thoughts that come from my dumb brain. We all got that? Okay.
仮面ライダービルドこの後すぐ
Hokuto has begun invading Toto with a trio known as the Crows. These guys can transform into Smash, however, they can freely control themselves in those forms as opposed to normal Smash. They kick Sento and Banjo's butt, so Banjo takes the Splash Driver to get an upper hand on the Crows. The Splash Driver was another one of Katsuragi's old weapons that Sento rebuilt, and he uses jellies rather than full bottles, continuing the drink theming as in Japan, there's jelly-like drinks that are very popular. Sento and Banjo defeat the Crows, but the boss of them, Kazumi, steps in with his own Splash Driver made from the blueprints Bloodstock stole.
変身
Before we go too deep into Kazumi, let's take a little detour by talking about the Splash Driver and the suits associated with it. The jellies serve as the underdeveloped second quarter gimmick of the season, and I think out of all the second quarter gimmicks in Rider, the jellies got the biggest short end of the stick, as later on, another Kamen Rider uses the Splash Driver, and instead of a jelly, he uses a special full bottle. Not to mention, nearly every Splash Driver user will use the build driver for a final form. Speaking of forms, Banjo gets Cross Charge, and Kazumi becomes Kamen Rider Grease, and I think they're both pretty cool suits. I know a lot of people hate Cross Charge and consider it a downgrade to Cross's other suits, but I think it's still a good design, and it makes sense that it would be a departure from the other Cross suit since it uses a different belt. Back to Kazumi, he used to be a potato farmer, but the farming industry was destroyed thanks to the rise of the Skywall. This led him and a few of his workers who would become the Crows, giving themselves up to become weapons of Hokuto in order to protect their farming buddies. Kazumi is a determined guy when it comes to protecting those closest to him, like the Crows, along with having a respectable moral code. Which is why it sucks that most people boil his entire character down to simp because he likes Masora a lot, when his character is much more than that, as he's just an ordinary guy thrust into a war because he felt a need to protect his community. While yes, his love for Masora is played up for laughs, there is a legit emotional reason behind it, as Masora's pop idol alter ego, Mitan, gave Kazumi and his farming buddies some escapism on their bricks, in between the strife they endured in a collapsing world. Well, that's totally pure fiction and not relatable one bit. Anyway, the two forces go at it for a couple episodes, but things start to heat up when the Crows get a power boost to become Hazard Smashes. This makes them stronger but at the cost of their lives, as they will die if they're defeated. Bloodstock decides to give Sento an upper hand against Hokuto by giving him the Hazard Trigger, another one of Katsuragi's old weapons. While it will make Sento stronger, there is a chance that if he uses it for too long, he'll go insane. Despite the risks, Sento uses the trigger to fight, and...
おいおいしっかりしろよ心配だな頭は俺がいないと何もできないから
Sento falls into a state of depression, refusing to fight. Since the beginning of this arc, Sento's been reluctant to join this war since he has guilt over what he did as Katsuragi, believing the Rider system shouldn't be used as a weapon for war, and with the Hazard Trigger making him kill... Both him and Kazumi grieve heavily over the Crow's death, though that doesn't stop Hokuto from challenging Toto to a proxy battle, which will determine who gets to Pandora's box, with the now recovered Prime Minister asking if Sento would represent Toto in the battle, but he initially refuses, still under despair. Bloodstock finds Sento and gives him a bunch of bottles to use in the battle, along with letting Sento vent his frustrations through a fight. Scenes like this is why I love Bloodstock, as he's still a funny evil bastard we all know and love who's secretly manipulating everyone, but he also grew a connection to Sento and helps him in a way that still advances his master plans, but gives him the help he needs in a twisted sort of way. It also reinforces the message that Bloodstock created Build with how much he's helped Sento throughout the first 20 or so episodes. Sento finally accepts the battle and uses the hazard trigger to win, though Banjo stops him before he can cause any more damage, which leads to a great bro moment between the two. Bloodstock has been playing Hokuto like a fiddle, actually working for Sato, who takes over Hokuto with their own Kamen Editor, Kamen Editor Rogue. Wait, Rogue? That sounds similar to Night Rogue. Oh, so before Sento used the hazard trigger, the Prime Minister recovered, causing Gentoku to run away and undergo extreme physical and mental training to become Commander Rogue for Sato. This was in order to get stronger so he can lead the country to a better future. He's accompanied by two pseudo-riders, Engine and Rebecon Bros, but they have like no personality outside of strong evil henchmen to beat up for fight scenes, but hey, they look cool. So once again, the two forces clash, a proxy battle ensues, this time being a best of 3 with Grease beating one of the bros, Banjo losing against the other bro, and Sento fighting Gentoku with a new power-up that lets him control the hazard form, Rabbit Rabbit and Tank Tank. Now from the sounds of things, this sounds like a near structural copy of the last storyline, and it kinda is if you look at it in the broad strokes, but the details are very different. Grease joins Sento and Banjo after losing the other crows against Sato's forces. Gentoku and Sento have an emotional battle with their ideals during the proxy fight, and Banjo reaffirms his care for human life despite being lied to about the consequences. These are all great moments for the main cast that add on to what we already know about them through past episodes. My personal favorite of these developments comes from the introduction of Rabbit Rabbit Tank Tank, as it's a power-up of Sento's own creation to control the power of hazard, which can represent Sento becoming his own hero through the ashes of his past self. Katsuragi might have made the rider system for war, but Sento will refine it for love and peace. Masora also gets some development, as it's revealed that she's been able to purify the bottles because the Queen of Mars, known as Vernage, lives inside of her, and she mentions a villain known as Evil, who destroyed Mars many years ago. There's also lore about Namba Heavy Industries given, who are the weapons dealers that build the robot foot soldiers that all the nations use to defend themselves against threats. Foot soldiers that Build has been fighting all season. They take a bunch of orphans at a young age and make them swear loyalty to Namba, making them the children of Namba, which is definitely a commentary on propaganda and the effects it can have on youth. They have been helping Sato take over the country, but once they lose the proxy battle, Bloodstock kills the Prime Minister and gives Namba his face so that he may control Sato and start Stock's endgame. Though if I'm honest, Namba Heavy Industries feels like an underdeveloped afterthought in the grand scheme of things, especially since Arc 3 will focus on cosmic threats rather than the dreaded Civil War of Arc 2. It's still cool world building, but it could have been better handled and implemented into the overall plot.
ビルド振って選んでパワーアップさらに振ってデラックスフルフルラビットタンクボトル集めたフルボトルで攻撃
Arc 2 of Build is a really great expansion to its core themes of justice, war, and loss, with a feel closer to the second half of Heisei with a bunch of Kamen Riders fighting each other compared to the Rider vs. Monster action of Arc 1. The political commentary also becomes more overt in this arc, with Namba Heavy Industries having more of a presence and the civil war between nations, which I don't think I'm fit to properly analyze the context of as a Western fella, but I still appreciate the ball Shogomuto and the rest of the producers had to talk about war profiteers and corrupt leaders in a show primarily aimed towards kids. That's all I got to say on Arc 2, so on to the third and final arc of Build. Things about to get wild, y'all. Arc 3 of Kamen Rider Build is often seen as the weakest part of the series by the Western tokusatsu community, thanks to the switch of focus to fighting a singular cosmic threat and the pacing not being as well done as previous arcs. I would respectfully disagree, as I think this arc has some of the best episodes of Build and wraps everything up in a grand and cohesive way. Yeah, it probably could have been shorter, but it's still an enjoyable and powerful ride of a show, so I'm not complaining that much. Thanks to Bloodstar collecting the full bottles and the Pandora's box, the first level of the Pandora's Tower has arisen, coupled with the most destructive opera show ever witnessed. Our heroes raid the tower, and during the raid, Banjo uses a brand new power-up that Sento made, which serves as his final form, Cross Magma. From the raw transformation of magma being poured onto Banjo, then solidifying into the awesome suit, to the insert song Burning My Soul playing over the fight, Cross Magma's debut fight is absolutely fantastic. Oh yeah, Build does insert songs, and they're okay, okay, but severely underutilized, which is fine as a lot of them go for a pop tone that wouldn't fit most of Build's fights and emotional moments. During these episodes, Masora and Sawa discover that Banjo may not be human thanks to some strange events in his past. This is later confirmed by Bloodstock, who attempts to taunt Banjo with this information. The taunts are futile as Banjo doesn't care, as even if his power comes from destruction, he'll use it to fight for justice. For love and peace. We'll come back to that detail very soon, as for now, Stock is holding Toto's Prime Minister hostage to get the E-Volt driver back, which is hidden in the cafe's basement. The writers play hooky with it, but Stock ultimately gets his hands on it in the end. Kamen under E-Volt attempts to kill Gentoku, but the Prime Minister hops in to save his son at the cost of his life. Now that E-Volt is debuted, it's time for an info dump of what the hell Bloodstock is. Or should I say, E-Volt. As mentioned in the previous arc, E-Volt is a being from another world who destroyed Mars years ago, but Vernard sealed him in Pandora's box. 23 years ago, he sent a part of himself to Earth that ended up possessing Banjo, making him part of E-Volt. Then 10 years later, when Soichi went to Mars and found Pandora's box, E-Volt possessed him and attempted to open it on Earth, which created the Skywall. So throughout the next few episodes, E-Volt possesses both Santo and Banjo to get more powerful, which lets him gain new forms based on their powers, till he unlocks his ultimate form, E-Volt Black Hole, which looks familiar to something, but I don't know what. After E-Volt regains his ultimate form, Sento gets his body back. However, it's not exactly Sento.
俺は桂木匠だ
Compared to the snarky yet well-meaning Sento, Katsuragi's cold, reserved, and blunt, with a belief that friends will just make everything worse. The episodes of Katsuragi are a fascinating deep dive into a character we've only seen via flashbacks, getting to know him better and see how he interacts with the rest of the cast. In particular, it's interesting to see how he interacts with Gentoku given the shared history between the two. Between all of this, E-Volt kills the head of Namba and presents an ultimatum to one of Namba's loyalists, Utsumi, to either follow E-Volt or get killed like his master. Utsumi decides to swear loyalty to E-Volt and become Kamen Rider Mad Rogue.
ならば答えは一つ
Despite being in the show from the start, I haven't talked much about Utsumi. That's because he's usually in the background of big events, usually aiding either Gentoku or Namba depending on which part of the show we're in. By becoming Mad Rogue and giving him the spotlight, this arc finally gives Utsumi something to do, along with making him quite a tragic character. Not only was he a part of Namba Heavy Industries propaganda, but Gentoku betrayed him early in the show as Night Rogue. This drove Utsumi mad and caused him to only look out for himself. Not only is this a tragic arc for Utsumi, but it's a great reflection of Gentoku's misdeeds that he starts to course correct by slowly becoming an ally of Sento in the gang. Eventually, Katsuragi gives his body back to Sento, which leads to the showcase of Build's final form, Genius. When watching Kamen Rider Build for the first time, I thought the story took a small dip in storytelling quality for a few episodes of the plotline of Katsuragi's dad becoming another Build and working for E-Volt. But on this rewatch, I realized that it was foreshadowed throughout the entire arc, with talks of Sento's dad being alive. In addition, the plotline was important, as not only it progressed Sento's journey as a character, it gave him the plan to defeat E-Volt in the final stretch of episodes. I also appreciate the lore tidbit that the Build driver was based on the E-Volt driver, which is a cool way to explain the repaint. In addition to the epic plot stuff, this is also where we see Gentoku's love of wacky fashion come into play, which isn't really elaborated on and kinda comes out of nowhere. I personally think that this is him expressing a passion he had because he wasn't really close to any of his past partners, but now that he's allied with Team Build, he feels comfortable expressing himself and showing his true self. Or it could just be that Kensuke Mikami, who played Gentoku on the show, expressed that his daughter found him scary since he played a villain on a kid's show. Either one works.
仮面ライダービルドこの後最終回
And now it's time for the finale, as Evolt challenges our heroes to raid the completed Pandora's Tower and defeat him, with many civilian lives on the line. After one last heartfelt night between our heroes, the raid on Pandora's Tower begins, with clones of returning enemies like the Crows and Hellbros standing in the way of our heroes. Kazumi takes on the Crows and uses one last brand new power-up to turn into Grease Blizzard. The power is too much for him to handle though, and the battle ends up killing him in the end, but not before he has one last emotional moment with Masora.
幸せもんだな。あいつらに自慢してやんねえとな。
Meanwhile, Utsumi defects from Evolt as it's revealed that he only joined him to eventually get revenge for Namba, but before Utsumi can get his revenge, Evolt kills him. This leads the 3 remaining Kamen Riders, Sento, Banjo, and Gentoku, 3 characters we've been following since episode 1 and whose growth have been major driving forces in this show, charged toward Evolt. They manage to weaken him at the cost of Gentoku's life, which leads to our heroes enacting their master plan. You see, Evolt can't be stopped, and is in the process of destroying the world, so the only way to defeat him is using Pandora's box to fuse the current world with another world. This would eliminate Evolt from existence and restore the world to a somewhat normal state. The fusion begins as Banjo takes Evolt into a tear of light in the sky, but that would kill him as well since he's part Evolt.
Sento. ありがとうな。
Sento goes into the tear to save Banjo, which leads to the final episode of Kamen Rider Build. Evolt and Sento have one last final battle, with Evolt proclaiming once again that he's just a fake hero created for his master plan. This might have once been the case, but over the course of the show, Sento became a real hero by using the power instilled with him for good with the help of his friends, and now Evolt has no control over him. So, with one final rider kick using Banjo's power, Evolt is defeated for good, and I'm sure we'll never see him again in some sort of V-cinema. And now the worlds are fused together, which means the Skywall doesn't exist anymore, and the characters are alive and in happier places, but with no memory of what happened, except for Sento and Banjo, who do remember the events of the old world as the series ends with the 2 reuniting.
なんだよこれ。俺たちの記憶を49のエピソードに分けてデータ化するんだよ。
仮面ライダービルドこの後すぐ
Kamen Rider Build is near perfection in my eyes. The characters have so many layers to them, the tone balances comedy and drama very well, the aesthetics are gorgeous, and despite a few hiccups, the series is rewarding to look at as a big picture story, with how all the elements are paid off and referenced. It really does succeed at combining all of the elements that make Kamen Rider great from all of the eras, like the producers intended. Please watch this show, as while I might have spoiled the broad strokes, it's much more satisfying to watch the actual events unfold, and I still left out a lot of cool moments for you to experience for yourself. And now, with all of that being said and concluded, I hope you enjoy the show, make sure to tip your waiters, and I'll see you in the next one.